On the table are two examples of recently released Worksharp
RMX
knives. And this will be an instructional video on how to convert the knives from manual to automatic and from automatic to manual. I am calling these knives Whssk. I will explain why in the video, as well as explaining why I have black marker dots on the hardware here. But before I get into my little tips and findings, I'll let the designer of this knife walk you through the factory recommended procedure for converting from manual to auto. Hi everybody, I'm here at the Atlanta Blade Show with no other than Dan Dovel. I hope I said it right. He's the designer of the new Worksharp knife. Hey Dan. Hi. You're about to get a full tutorial from the creator of the knife. So grab your Whssk, grab the box, let's go.
You basically get a complete kit in the box. You'll basically get the knife. This is the compact drop point M390. You get a tool for doing servicing. Bag of spare parts includes spare springs, bearing, any screw you might lose. There's only one or two screws in it. And then this is the auto bushing. So you'll notice it has a gear pattern on the front of it instead of being a smooth space. And it includes a torsion spring inside of it. You'll see the gear pattern versus the standard smooth. So essentially to do the conversion, you'll basically remove this screw and drop this pivot out, and we'll insert this one.
Okay.
And then the auto pivot, the key in the automatic pivot is you have this leg on the spring. That leg's going to engage a cutout that's in the blade. And you have these two keyways, and they engage a key that's in the housing. And that's what basically provides the amount of torsion to deploy the blade. So I like to open the blades most of the way, and I'll basically depress the button, and I loosen this screw. And then I use the screw to push out the bearing retainer or pivot from the other side. I'll turn it over so you can see what you're looking at. We'll let the screw drop out. So you have a bearing cavity in there. And if you look, there's a small pocket right there, that dark thing you see. That's where that leg of that spring is going to go. Make sure when you're doing the switch to remove this bearing, because that front bearing is where the spring runs. So if you leave the bearing in there, it gets a little crowded.
Okay.
So now you can use the tool. There's instructions in here how to do this. You can use the little tool. It's magnetic and attaches to, so you can use that to do torsion, or you can do it by hand. It's not a lot of torsion, so it's easy enough to do by hand. But we'll take that little spring leg that's there, and we want to guide that into that bearing pocket. And you'll feel when you're in, you want to make sure you're in that bearing pocket, so I can feel resistance. See when I turn it, it wants to turn back. So I know that my spring is engaged in the pocket. And then I'm going to rotate it until one of those two keyways land in that key that's right there. Right? And so that's what's preloading, basically.
Clockwise?
Clockwise.
Clockwise, okay.
So you're going to turn it clockwise, and that's what's pre-charging that spring. And there's two settings. There's a lighter setting right here. You see that didn't even rotate the blade out of its kind of its stop position. That lighter setting I like because it allows you to very easily one-hand close it, right? And then there's a second setting. These aren't super fast autos, but there's a second setting there. You see that one's got a little more torque, and it actually fully deploy the blade. They'll both fully deploy it. One just moves it slower. This one requires more force to basically fold it up. So for a lot of people, that'll be a two-hand close, right? But now you just hold all that shut. You want to make sure that this is essentially flush, and that's telling you you've got those keys aligned, so you're not sitting up crooked on it. And you got the bearing down. That's really important, right? And now we'll put the screw back in. And anytime you're working on a pivot of a knife, it's always a good idea to unlock it. So I'm pushing that lock, because as you're tightening that pivot up, you don't want to jam that hardened blade steel into that hardened lock, right? So I'm going to tighten this up. The easiest way I found to tune knives is to over tighten them. So I'm going to depress the lock, and notice how that blade's not deploying. I'll loosen the screw until that blade deploys. Just so loosen it a little bit at a time until that blade just starts moving. If it's in a manual mode, you loosen it until it just starts to drop. And that will be minimal or no blade play at that point. So now we have the knife in automatic mode in a few seconds, maybe a minute. We do a crossover like that.
Pardon my little interlude here. This is not the only video that I'm publishing about this knife. I interviewed Dan quite extensively, and he gave me a bunch of very solid insights in how this knife was developed, what problems was he trying to solve with his design. He will explain the selection of unorthodox materials for the handle. He will do a full disassembly of this knife and explain each component. So it'll be very nerdy, technical video, and that's why I am publishing this one as free public access. And the other video will be writing in my membership area until all my members have a chance to watch it. All right, Dan made it look very easy. I tried this a few times, both following his instruction and following the manual that's provided with the knife. And I found some minor difficulties, and I have a few tips to share with you guys on what I discovered. So I'm going to convert the full length now, which is currently in the manual mode. All right, Dan made it look very easy. I tried this a few times, both following his instruction and following the manual that's provided with the knife. And I found some minor difficulties, and I have a few tips to share with you guys on what I discovered. So I'm going to convert the full length now, which is currently in the manual mode. This is a reverse tanto blade, they call it. So I am going to partially open the blade like so, and the reason I'll explain in a second, and just start unscrewing. So the pivot and the bearing came on. We set them aside. We are not using those. So the reason I have the blade partially open is because in this position it actually retains the push button. I dropped a little screw here. Okay, so the manual tells you to line up. There's an arrow, which I personally think should be a round dot here, pointing to the neutral locate position. And then there's a single dash that corresponds to the lighter setting of the spring, and a double dash that corresponds to the heaviest setting of the spring. So what you need to do before you fidget with it, as you will not have the use of both hands, at this stage, you know, the knife is sitting on the table, nothing is falling out. You can now line up the first dash, as the manual says, to the first slot on your left. That's your first slot. The slot on your right will be lining up with a double dash. Now you will find a pocket inside the blade for the tab here on the blade, and it rotates with the blade. So that key way can end up in different locations. So you need to find it and insert this tab into it. So now I'm going to press down on it. Now I can flip it over and insert the screw and start the thread. I did like 3/4 of the full rotation here. Right. Okay, now I'm going to flip it over and basically with everything in this position start rotating the spring-loaded mechanism until I feel the first, you see that it's moving the blade, and now I felt the first click. I'm going to press it down, I'm going to set it to the lighter setting. And now I can come at it from this side with just the bit here. And start screwing it in. So at this point, you're basically done. Except, let's see, yeah. So the company recommends over tightening this. I personally wouldn't do it because this is brass, this is hardened steel, this is hardened steel. The bearings have brass races. The bearing is brass as well. So I don't like over tightening. I think if you get the play in the end here, you can adjust it using the bit. Okay? You can even put it here and play with it to give you more tactile indication of where you're at. So this is it. So now it's on the first setting. So now you're on the lighter setting. I'm going to mark it here. Probably easier to see that way. I'm going to put a little dot here. So that corresponds to the first single dash line on the tool, like so. So I'm going to leave the tool here. And I want to go to our heaviest setting. So what I learned is, well, first I'm going to partially deploy the blade. And I am applying pressure on the tool. I'm going to start unscrewing it. Until the screw, basically, I want to get to the actual bottom of the threads until the screw can fall out. I'm going to put it back in. I don't want to go through all these previous steps. I'm going to put it in just maybe half to 3/4 turn. Okay, and then I'm going to press on the screw, and that loosened the spring. So now, to me, both the dashes and the actual keyways are visible. So I'm just going to see my blade is resting on the mat here. I'm just going straight for the second double dashed position, right? I'm going to apply this pressure. You heard the click. That's important. That means the keyway is engaging the key. And I'm just going to screw it in all the way. Pretty tight. Okay, so now I am probably a little too tight. No, the knife is functioning. Actually, I was a little loose, right? So no worries. There's a little bit of a blade play here. I'm going to continue screwing it in until there's no blade play, and the knife still functions. So now there's no blade play in any direction. Setting number 1 is here. Setting number 2 is now at 6 o'clock, which means the knife is at its tightest setting. So obviously you can take it all the way back to disassembling the pivot. Let's check out the centering here. And the blade is perfectly centered. What I like about that, going as tight as you can without over tightening, you're minimizing the chance of the screw backing out. Especially if you've done it a few times, that Loctite that's pre-applied to the screw will start wearing out, and maybe you should add a little bit of your own Loctite. I'll throw a link in the description on what Loctite I recommend. Or you can just keep checking the blade for the play to make sure it's not getting loose. And at this setting of the knife, the Whssk sound, that's why I call it Whssk instead of WSK, it's even more pronounced. Let me put the microphone closer here. I hope you could hear this. It's almost as tricky to put the manual pivot back in. So I'll show you how that is done, because that is actually not in the manual. So you will unlock the knife here. I'm going to just rest the blade. You don't want to put too much pressure on the blade. So, in small angle, I'm just trying to retain the button here. And I'm actually securing all this with 2 fingers. So it's a triple sort of triple protection here. And you just start unscrewing it until this comes out. Actually, so you unscrew it until you detect that it is no longer engaging the threads, and then holding the button in place, pushing everything, and the spring may still be under tension. So I'm putting my finger here without any pressure and letting it come out. There you go. So you can get yourself in a situation where if it's fully spring-loaded, it'll pop out and the spring can fly away from you. So now you can return it to this orientation and partially close the blade. And what I did here, you see the slot or keyway that engages this key. I marked it because there's no visual indication other than this black magic marker mark here. So your goal is to kind of put it all in like this, and then orientate it or orient it this way, and then press down so the screw pops up on this side like this, and screw it back in. Trust me, marking this spot it's $1 million tip or $150 tip. You don't want to have it out of alignment and tighten the screw because you're potentially damaging the, this is steel. On magnesium and other piece of steel, do yourself a favor and mark it. That's not in the manual. Right now I'm a little loose here, so I'm gonna partially close it, hold the button down. You don't want that metal to metal tightening. So now it's no play and it's functional.